A scruffy old man tripped and fell in an elevator. Luckily, a kind-hearted nurse was there to see it happen. Without a word, she rushed him to the doctor for a checkup. Little did she know that the old man was a mountain god, and her life was about to be turned upside down. The doctor, overwhelmed by the mountain god's teeth, which hadn't been brushed in 3 years, felt a wave of nausea. But the nurse, instead of making a face, encouraged the old man to open his mouth wide. The mountain god, with a knowing look, seemed to have found the right person. When it was time for the mountain god to be discharged, the nurse, not wanting to leave him to his own devices, asked the doctor for a prescription and brought it to him herself. Worried he might not be able to afford the medicine, she even gave him some of her own money, telling him to use any leftover cash to buy himself something to eat. The mountain god was baffled by her kindness and asked her if she felt sorry for him, a ragged old man. She assured him she wasn't pitying him, but was simply worried for his well-being. The mountain god, sensing she was in a hurry, humorously reminded her that she probably didn't have time to feel sorry for him anymore. Suddenly, the nurse remembered that the head nurse had been urgently looking for her right after she stepped out of the elevator. She hurried out of the room, apologizing to the mountain god. "You're half an hour late," the head nurse berated her. The nurse, flustered, explained she had just helped an elderly man who had fallen in the elevator, but the head nurse was skeptical. She handed the nurse a stack of paperwork and told her to finish it before leaving for the day. As the night wore on, the nurse finally clocked out and slumped onto a bench in the hospital lobby, feeling utterly discouraged. Just then, the mountain god appeared, this time holding a container of yogurt. He offered it to her, suggesting they sit outside and enjoy it together. Seeing her glum expression, the mountain god offered to grant her 3 wishes as a way of repaying her kindness. He told her to reveal her deepest desires, and he would make them come true. She chuckled, teasing him by saying, "You're not actually a mountain god, so it's not a sure thing. Go on, tell me your wish." The mountain god was surprised to learn she had 3 wishes. First, she longed to see her family again. Second, she dreamt of becoming an exceptional nurse. And lastly, she hoped to find a kind, genuine person to marry and build a happy family with. The mountain god nodded in approval and asked her to open her hand. He placed a necklace with a key pendant in her palm. Looking at the key, the nurse couldn't help but recall her tragic past. The mountain god, with a knowing smile, said, "From this day forward, this key will grant you your 3 wishes. We shall begin with your desire to reunite with your family." As if on cue, a nun from the convent where the nurse had lived came searching for her. The nun curiously questioned Jae-in about being alone in the middle of the night. When Jae-in turned around, she noticed the old man had vanished without a trace. The nun told Jae-in that, before the head nun passed away, she had entrusted her with something. It was a letter from her father, written to her over the past 17 years. Looking at the key necklace in her hand, Jae-in remembered the mountain god's words. "Well, time to meet your family," she said, glancing at the thick stack of letters from her father. Jae-in had never believed her life could have a fairy tale ending, but at that moment, she finally did. The next day, she went to find her father using the address written in the letters. Heaven didn't disappoint her. She found the address and, filled with newfound hope, prepared to knock on the door. On a stormy day, her mother was speeding down the road, completely oblivious to her surroundings. A warning sign indicated a landslide ahead, but the young girl was scared by her mother's speed and urged her to slow down. Her mother reassured her, saying it was fine. As her mother turned to comfort her daughter and looked back, she saw the rock slide in front of them. But it was too late. The car slammed into the guardrail, flipping through the air. In that critical moment, the mother instinctively shielded her daughter. After spinning 360 degrees in the air, the car crashed heavily to the ground. When rescue workers arrived, they found the mother unconscious. They searched the surrounding area but couldn't find the young girl. They only discovered a shoe near the riverbank. They suspected the girl had fallen into the river and been swept away. When the girl woke up, she found herself deep in the mountains. She fearfully called out for her mother. "Mother!" After being found by rescue workers, the girl lost her memory, forgetting her name, her home, and her parents. To make matters worse, her father was murdered by his own brother. Her mother became a vegetable, unconscious and unresponsive. After learning of the girl's amnesia, the brothers plotted to take over her father's company. They ordered the father's driver to remove the girl's name from the family register and take her to a remote convent to start a new life. The driver, unable to betray his conscience, warned the girl before leaving. He told her never to forget her name, Yoon Jae-in. The young heiress, who could have lived a life of privilege, was now constantly bullied at the convent. She was mocked as a poor, abandoned child. But in Jae-in's eyes, she didn't believe she was abandoned. If she had truly been discarded, her father wouldn't have told her her real name. There must be some unspoken hardship that forced him to send her to the convent. She was certain that one day her father would come for her. 17 years had passed, and Jae-in had yet to be reunited with her father. She grew up and, through her own hard work, became a nurse at the hospital. Little did she know that her life would change dramatically while working there. Following the address on the letter, Jae-in found her father's noodle shop. Just as she was about to open the door, a group of thugs came to collect protection money and shoved her aside. Seeing her father being bullied, Jae-in didn't hesitate. She charged at the thugs, but within a minute, they pushed her out of the shop. She stumbled into a woman carrying vegetables for her husband. The woman scolded Jae-in for not watching where she was going. Jae-in quickly apologized. Suddenly, a thug grabbed her. The woman, seeing her freshly bought vegetables crushed underfoot, flew into a rage and attacked the thug. A brawl ensued. Needless to say, everyone ended up at the police station. During questioning, the police asked Jae-in for her name. When the driver heard the girl who stood up for him was named Yoon Jae-in, he was completely stunned. "You're really Jae-in?" he asked incredulously. Tears streamed down Jae-in's face as she looked at the driver. "Father," she whispered. Her aunt, who was beside the driver, was completely baffled. She had no idea her husband had a grown daughter. This was all too much to handle. Jae-in, who had lost her memory, unknowingly treated the man who had killed her biological father as her own father. Mr. Kim felt guilty. He didn't feel worthy of being Jae-in's father. He decided to tell her the truth. Just then, Mr. Kim's wife stormed in. She accused him of betrayal, claiming he had suddenly produced a grown daughter out of nowhere. She threw things at Jae-in, blaming her for disrupting their lives. She demanded that Jae-in leave immediately. Jae-in felt that meeting her father even once was a miracle. She bid him goodbye and turned to leave. As she was walking away, she bumped into Young Kwang, who was returning home from the hospital. Jae-in was taken aback. They knew each other. Young Kwang was a patient she had taken care of. They both failed to recognize each other as childhood friends. Young Kwang confronted Jae-in, asking why she was calling his father Dad. Jae-in suddenly realized that she and Young Kwang were now half-siblings. Young Kwang recalled the time he was near death at the hospital, and it was Jae-in who donated her blood to save him. Now she was his sister, and he felt like he was going crazy. Young Kwang ran to his father, accusing him of betraying his mother, causing both his mother and Jae-in to suffer because of him. Seeing his father's sadness and regret, Young Kwang told him that Jae-in was his lifesaver. When he was bleeding out and about to die, Jae-in's blood type was a match, and she saved his life. Meanwhile, Jae-in left Mr. Kim's house, heartbroken. She took out the key the mountain god had given her, realizing that her dream of reuniting with her family was about to shatter. Just then, Young Kwang appeared and took Jae-in home. On the other side, Mr. Kim went to the memorial altar of Jae-in's parents to apologize. Years ago, he had carelessly abandoned Jae-in at the welfare institution, but now she had become his son's savior. Mr. Kim decided it was time for Jae-in to reclaim her rightful place as the heiress of the conglomerate. He called Jae Myung, the man who had illegally taken over Jae-in's father's company, and told him Jae-in was back. He wanted to help Jae-in get her life back, but the cruel Jae Myung couldn't bear to give up the chairman position he had fought so hard to obtain. He ordered in June to eliminate Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim realized that his time was running out. He called the prosecutor who handled the case of Jae-in's father's death and revealed the truth. Unfortunately, the prosecutor was in the shower and didn't answer. He sent a text message informing the prosecutor that Jae-in was still alive. Suddenly, Jae Myung's henchman appeared and took Mr. Kim away. The phone fell to the ground, and the message was not sent before a subordinate saw it. The prosecutor, finished with his shower, noticed multiple missed calls. He sensed something was terribly wrong. The prosecutor immediately called Mr. Kim back, but the phone had been disconnected by Incheon. Mr. Kim managed to escape the clutches of the henchman, but he couldn't outrun fate. He was involved in a car accident, and without any miracle, he was sure to die. With his last bit of strength, he told his wife, Jae-in, you must bring Jae-in back." His words were left unfinished, and the only person who knew Jae-in's true identity was gone. On the other hand, Jae Myung couldn't find Jae-in. He flew into a rage and reprimanded Incheon. It seemed that he had not told him what he had seen. It turned out that Incheon was Jae Myung's nephew. After his father passed away, Jae Myung had always treated him poorly. Now it seemed that Incheon had deliberately withheld the information about the text message. He had his own agenda. He wanted to use Jae-in to overthrow Jae Myung. Get ready for the most bizarre interview you've ever seen. Each interviewee was given a sack. They were told to fill the sack with as many bricks as they wanted, because their yearly salary would be determined by the number of bricks in their sack. Each brick was worth 1 million won. Hyo Young-do explained, 1 brick in the sack means your yearly salary will be 1 million won. 10 bricks means 10 million won. 100 bricks. You do the math. How many bricks you put in the sack is how much you'll earn in a year. All the interviewees thought the company was insane, but little did they know how much they would regret it later. One person asked if they could put in as many bricks as they wanted. That's right, Hyo Young-do said. Starting now, you have 5 minutes. Time starts now. The interviewees were like warriors, greedily stuffing bricks into their sacks, worried they wouldn't get enough. Before long, the time was up, and everyone had filled their sacks to the brim. But there were some who were not greedy. Jae-in took only 1 brick. In-woo, the heir to a wealthy family, didn't take a single brick, since this company was originally his father's. But Jae-in's friend Wang had stuffed a whopping 35 bricks into his sack. When everyone heard Hyo Young-do say, "Next, you have to carry the sacks of bricks to the rooftop. The building has 33 floors." They were all stunned. They felt like they were going insane. To make matters worse, they weren't allowed to use the elevator. They had to take the stairs. If anyone took out a single brick or received help from anyone else, they would be disqualified. Only those who could carry their own weight to the company rooftop would be eligible for the corresponding salary and the subsequent one-on-one interview. They had 10 minutes to reach the rooftop. Anyone who didn't make it within that time frame would also be disqualified. With that, Hyo Young-do went up to the rooftop. Seeing this, the interviewees scrambled to grab their sacks. They began to regret their choices. Some even gave up right there. In-woo, carrying an empty sack, walked up to Wang, mocking him for stuffing his sack full of bricks. He said he was disqualified before he even started. He also snidely told Yang Kwang that he should just give up and go home. Jae-in looked at Young Kwang, who was downcast and dejected. She encouraged him. "You're not the type to give up. You have to prove them wrong." Young Kwang nodded, saying, "My fate is in my own hands, not in the hands of destiny." He struggled to carry his heavy sack of bricks, climbing towards the rooftop. But just as he was about to reach the top, In-woo appeared and shoved Young Kwang down the stairs. Young Kwang fell unconscious. Jae-in, meanwhile, climbed effortlessly to the 33rd floor. In-woo also made it to the rooftop. By now, time was running out. Hyo Young-do didn't see Young Kwang. He had been anxiously waiting for him to arrive, and he couldn't hold back any longer. He took off his sunglasses. Just then, Young Kwang started to regain consciousness. There was only 1 minute left. Jae-in was worried. Something must have happened to him. If not, he should have already reached the rooftop by now. Given his determination, she decided to risk being disqualified and went down to find him. The countdown began. In the nick of time, Young Kwang, carrying his sack of bricks, crawled up to the rooftop. Seeing Young Kwang, In-woo panicked. He was afraid Young Kwang would come after him. But Young Kwang didn't disappoint him. He charged at In-woo and punched him square in the face, sending him crashing to the ground. This scene was captured by In-woo's father's security cameras. The chairman, seeing his son being beaten up, was furious. He had to make Young Kwang's life miserable. A young woman came across a man in critical condition. The kind-hearted woman didn't hesitate to rush him to the hospital. After regaining consciousness, the man asked why she had saved him. She replied, "You were so badly injured. I couldn't leave you alone." The man stared at the kind woman in front of him, lost in thought. The next day, while Jae-in was working part-time at a juice shop, the man came to find her. Jae-in accidentally spilled juice on a customer. She quickly apologized, but the customer flew into a rage, accusing her of being blind. He then demanded that she pay for his clothes. Just when she didn't know what to do, the man appeared and gave the customer a large check. The customer, seeing so much money, quickly pocketed the check and left without a word. The man had come to repay Jae-in for saving his life the previous day. She waved him off, saying it was nothing. She would have done the same for anyone. There was no need for repayment. She would pay for the clothes later when she had the money. The man investigated and learned that Jae-in had been a professional nurse. Due to special circumstances, she had quit her job. He asked if she would be interested in a higher-paying job, which involved caring for a patient. Jae-in didn't want to be a private nurse, so she declined. But as she was about to leave, he said it was only for 2 months. The salary was 10 million won. If she could fulfill her duties for those 2 months, he would give her an additional 10%. Jae-in's eyes widened in disbelief. She sat down in a daze and, without thinking much, immediately agreed. She had no idea that the person she was supposed to care for was the son of the man who had murdered her father, In-woo, the spoiled son of a wealthy family. In-woo, due to his traumatic childhood, suffered from depression and seizures. He was most afraid of his wealthy father. Every time he saw his father, his condition would worsen. The next day, Jae-in started her job. When In-woo opened the door, he was stunned. He was captivated by Jae-in's bright smile. But inside the house, In-woo refused to acknowledge that he was sick. He said he had already fired over a dozen nurses, and if she didn't leave immediately, he would do something else to her. But Jae-in, wanting to earn money to help her family, didn't want to give up this opportunity. She tried to patiently explain her reason for working there. Before she could finish, In-woo bit her lip. Jae-in struggled to break free, but she didn't have enough strength to escape In-woo's grip. He pushed her down onto the couch. Her first experience as a private nurse for a wealthy heir involved being pinned down by him. She struggled desperately but couldn't escape. As he was about to achieve his goal, Jae-in fought back. She told him, "You're really sick. It's gotten into your bones. Just shut up." As they were struggling, In-woo's father called. In-woo was most afraid of his wealthy father. He would even have a seizure when he received a call from his father. Because of his traumatic childhood, In-woo suffered from depression and seizures. His father told him to go for an interview at the company and then hung up. Jae-in saw In-woo having a seizure and became worried. She hadn't realized his condition was so serious. But when she tried to comfort him, In-woo panicked and ran away. He locked himself in the bathroom. His body convulsed uncontrollably, even after she splashed cold water on him for a long time. After calming down, In-woo assumed Jae-in had been scared off by him and had run away. But then she suddenly returned with breakfast. She gently told him that his illness wasn't incurable. In-woo was surprised. After knowing his condition, she hadn't left, but was willing to stay and confidently treat him. Looking at her gentle demeanor, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Then he handed Jae-in a file. It turned out that under pressure from his father, In-woo had to work for their family company. He wanted Jae-in to join the company as well, so she could be there to take care of him. Soon, The interview day arrived. Jae-in was surprised to see Young Kwang there. After 17 years, fate had brought them together again. But Young Kwang and In-woo didn't recognize Jae-in as their childhood friend, and the company they were interviewing for was Jae-in's father's company. After the bizarre interview, only 11 people were left. Fortunately, all 3 of the main characters passed. As In-woo drove Jae-in away, he bragged to her about his driving skills. Jae-in was so scared that she didn't know what to do. After getting out of the car, she slumped to the ground. In-woo was confused. He didn't understand why she was so scared. She explained that she had been in a car accident when she was little. She couldn't remember anything, but she was still afraid. Suddenly, In-woo remembered seeing a news report on TV 17 years ago about a young girl named Jae-in and her family being in a car accident. He asked his father if Jae-in's father had really died in the accident. His father said he didn't know. He couldn't believe that his father had tricked him into taking over Jae-in's father's company. He had murdered her parents and then sent the amnesiac Jae into a remote orphanage. Now In-woo suspected that the private nurse named Jae-in was the same Jae-in he had liked as a child. He called Incheon and asked him to send him Jae-in's resume. On Jae-in's resume, it stated that she had been taken to an orphanage 17 years ago. Finally, he knew that the private nurse Incheon had found for him was the same girl he had liked 17 years ago. That evening, In-woo was pondering what would happen if his father learned that Jae-in was back. His father wouldn't let her go. Just then, his father and Incheon suddenly arrived, making him jump out of his skin. At that moment, Jae-in was also on her way. It turned out that his father had come to praise him for pushing Young Kwang down the stairs during the interview. He said that to become the next person to take over the company, he had to be ruthless and cruel. After a few simple words, just as he was about to leave, Jae-in appeared. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Jae-in, unaware of her true identity as a wealthy heiress, told the chairman that he should be kinder to his son. It would help his condition. The chairman was surprised that his son's private nurse was so bold. She dared to speak to him like that. He asked her name. In-woo, standing beside her, was extremely nervous, afraid his father would discover Jae-in's true identity. Just as Jae-in was about to answer, Incheon, standing next to her, intervened. He told the chairman to call her Ms. Yoon. He winked at Jae-in, telling her not to say anything. Although Jae-in didn't know why, In-woo, standing beside her, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to the two of them, the chairman hadn't discovered her true identity. He just reprimanded her and left. In-woo angrily scolded Jae-in, telling her never to make any suggestions to his father again. If she did, she could forget about being his private nurse. Then, In-woo angrily went to find Incheon. He asked why he knew about Jae-in's true identity and why he still recommended her as his private nurse. What was his motive? Desperately, Incheon told him about the day Jae-myung caught Jae-in. After he was injured saving his sister, he received a call saying they had caught Jae-in. When he rushed over, Jae-in had already escaped from the thugs, but bumped into him. He had lost too much blood and fainted. Fortunately, Jae-in had taken him to the hospital. Seeing how kind she was, he didn't tell his father that he had found her. Since she had saved him once, he couldn't bear to reveal her true identity to his father. That's why he had to hand her over to his son. He left her fate to him. Facing Jae-in, whom he had liked since childhood, what was In-woo to do? This company's interview process was truly unique. Hyo Young-do had prepared 11 mysterious boxes of different sizes for the 11 successful candidates to choose from. Because of the first round's brick-carrying challenge, one interviewee reminded everyone not to be greedy and to choose a smaller box. Otherwise, they would end up like those who stuffed their sacks full of bricks and were eliminated. Sure enough, people started choosing smaller boxes. When it was Young Kwang's turn, he chose the biggest box. The 2 remaining boxes of equal size were for Jae-in and In-woo. The interviewer told them to open their boxes. Young Kwang's box contained a down jacket, while In-woo and Jae-in's boxes contained a pair of sneakers. The remaining smaller boxes all held small, difficult-to-sell items. Then Hyo Young-do announced, "These are all new products from our company. You must successfully sell the item in your hand to one of the 3 Hyo Young-do representatives standing here. The first 4 to sell their products will be eligible to open the insurance contract with their names on it. Inside the insurance contract is the final task you must complete." One person who had received a small item started complaining that he had been given an unfair advantage. Hyo Young-do got angry and said, "You all chose these items yourselves. Now, you have 5 days. The first 4 to sell your product will be able to open the insurance contract. Go ahead, get to work." As Young Kwang left with his product, he unexpectedly ran into the company's chairman. The chairman recognized him immediately, remembering him from the first round of interviews. He had seen Young Kwang punch his son through the surveillance cameras. He was furious and went to find Hyo Young-do, demanding that he disqualify Young Kwang. Hyo Young-do told him, "Young Kwang did not violate any rules in the first round. For the sake of fairness, we can't eliminate him. If you disqualify Young Kwang because of your personal feelings, then where's the fairness in the interviews? We might as well just stop the whole thing." The chairman was left with no choice but to make things difficult for Young Kwang. He said that if Young Kwang could successfully sell his product to him, he would forget the past and allow him to join the company. Hyo Young-do was about to respond when Young Kwang immediately agreed. but he had no idea what a big hole he had dug for himself. From then on, wherever the chairman appeared, Young Kwang would appear there to market his product, but he was always turned away, even when the chairman was in a meeting. Young Kwang seized the opportunity and suddenly appeared under the table. The chairman was truly defeated by him. He had no choice but to give him a chance. He told Young Kwang that he was having a party later, and if he could make him laugh out loud at the party, he would buy his product. Young Kwang went to the party with the chairman. He was stunned to realize it was his old baseball team. His dream of becoming a baseball star had been shattered in this very team. He was heartbroken and had no desire to make the chairman laugh. He left the party. At that moment, the chairman called him back. He wanted Young Kwang to dress up as a clown and make him laugh. Young Kwang remembered his late father's words about enduring hardship no matter what, and his mother's struggle to make ends meet. He decided to play the role of a crazy clown, putting on a wild performance on stage. The audience was amused, but the chairman remained unmoved. After the performance, Young Kwang was furious and frustrated. He felt like a fool being played by the chairman. But who could understand the burden of supporting his family that he carried on his shoulders? The final interview day arrived, and no one had managed to sell their items yet. Hyo Young-do encouraged them, saying they still had a chance until the very end. Young Kwang, never one to give up, went to the chairman's new product launch. He no longer played by the chairman's rules. He began to mock him, saying he was punishing not only old horses, but also the ones who were trying their best. He accused the chairman of being biased, protecting his own horses while being harsh on others. Young Kwang confidently said to the chairman, "I will use softness to overcome hardness. I'll show you that gentleness can conquer strength." The chairman, taken aback, ordered his subordinates to drag Young Kwang out. Young Kwang mocked him, asking if he was afraid. He laughed out loud, saying, "Why would I be afraid of someone like you?" His confident smile made the chairman realize he had lost. Hyo Young-do immediately announced that Young Kwang had passed the second round. Young Kwang was unaware that this whole interview was orchestrated by the chairman. The chairman had planned this so that Young Kwang could retrieve a secret that his father had left behind in a safe before the car accident. Meanwhile, the department manager approached Hyo Young-do. He agreed to buy Jae-in's product because during the challenge, Jae-in didn't focus on selling. Instead, she went to the documentation room to study the product features from the perspective of a consumer. The manager had witnessed this. He told Hyo Young-do that Jae-in was the most diligent out of all the interviewees, and he was willing to buy her product. In-woo, on the other hand, had resorted to using his connections. He approached Jo Dae-sung and told him that his father was the chairman of the company and he would be the next chairman. He told Jo to consider his request carefully. Ultimately, the successful candidates included Young Kwang, who had proven his resilience, Jae-in, who was the most hardworking, In-woo, who used his connections, and another man who was given a special exemption. Young Kwang opened the safe and found his father's watch and a mysterious piece of paper. Just then, Hyo Young-do appeared and told Young Kwang what had happened to his father. It turned out that Mr. Kim wanted to return Jae into her rightful place as the heiress. He had called the man who had illegally taken over Jae-in's father's company. Knowing that the cruel Jae Myung wouldn't easily relinquish the company he had acquired, Mr. Kim knew he would be silenced, the only person who knew his secret. Mr. Kim had called his close friend to meet. When Hyo Young-do arrived, he saw Mr. Kim being attacked by the chairman's subordinates. He chased after them and witnessed Mr. Kim being stabbed. When the attackers left, Hyo Young-do arrived on the scene. On the way to the hospital, Mr. Kim wanted to tell Hyo Young-do about Jae-in's identity, but the doctor told him not to speak anymore. He put an oxygen mask on Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim could only write Jae-in's identity on a piece of paper. After Mr. Kim passed away, Hyo Young-do couldn't figure out what the numbers on the paper meant. Later, he saw the man who had attacked Mr. Kim at the company, confirming that Mr. Kim's death was connected to the chairman. Therefore, he wanted Young Kwang to get a job at the company. After gaining the chairman's trust, Young Kwang could decipher the secret on the paper. He suspected that the paper had something to do with the name of the previous chairman. He looked into the memorial tablet of the previous chairman's family. Young Kwang discovered the answer. The numbers on the paper matched the serial number on the memorial tablet. Young Kwang suddenly understood. Jae-in, who was staying at his house, wasn't his half-sister. She was the daughter of the previous chairman. Young Kwang was completely devastated. He went to find Hyo Young-do and told him the secret on the paper. Young Kwang wanted to restore Jae-in's position as the heiress. The beautiful girl had suffered a tragic fate. On her 17th birthday, her wealthy father passed away. Her mother was driving her to find her father when they had a car accident. Her mother became a vegetable and she lost her memory. Her father's brothers took over the company and threatened her father's driver to take her to a remote orphanage. 17 years later, her mother miraculously woke up. The doctor, who had been bribed, immediately called the villain who had become the chairman long ago. The cruel chairman asked Zell Yunzo if she remembered who she was, but the first thing she wanted to know after regaining consciousness was the whereabouts of her daughter, Jae-in. She asked the chairman where her daughter was, and the chairman was speechless. Later, Zell Yunzo fell back into a coma due to her weakened condition. The doctor told the chairman that her cognitive abilities and judgment were not fully restored yet, but the chairman was still worried. He asked the doctor, "Is there any chance she can recover better?" The doctor replied, "It's a miracle that she's woken up. but her strong will has exceeded my understanding. It's uncertain if she'll recover." But the chairman, after hearing the doctor's words, revealed a cruel expression. He slowly moved his left hand toward Zhao Yunzou's neck. Just as disaster was about to strike, the righteous prosecutor appeared. For years, she had been investigating the chairman. She told him that Zhao Yunzou seemed to be regaining consciousness. It was as if heaven had eyes. The chairman had no choice but to leave quietly. That day, Zhao Yunzou woke up from her nightmare, and the prosecutor was right by her side. Zhao Yunzou recognized the person in front of her immediately as the prosecutor from that day. The prosecutor was astonished. It seemed Zhao Yunzou had regained consciousness, but her consciousness was stuck at the moment of the car accident 17 years ago. She told the prosecutor that her daughter was still in the car. She begged her to go save her daughter. The prosecutor carefully surveyed the surroundings before closing the door and sighing. She told Zhao Yunzou that the car accident she remembered had happened 17 years ago. Zhao Yunzou was shocked. The prosecutor also confided in Zhao Yunzou about everything that had happened 17 years ago. As she listened, tears streamed down her face. It couldn't be. Both her daughter and her husband were gone. This was too much for her to bear. Prosecutor Anhui told Zhao Yunzou that she had to accept everything. Only then could she avenge her daughter and husband. But for now, she couldn't tell anyone that she had regained consciousness. All the medical staff here were the chairman's people. Zhao Yunzou felt like she was falling into an abyss. She missed her daughter so much. Zayin, she thought, where are you? As if she could hear her mother's call. The key necklace that the mountain god had given her, which could grant her wish of reuniting with her family, suddenly lit up. Zayin, who had lost her memory, believed that her mother was somewhere waiting for her. After calming down, Zhao Yunzou asked the prosecutor to help her reclaim her husband's company and find her daughter. With the prosecutor's help, Zhao Yunzou began to secretly practice physical therapy. But Jae Myung eventually discovered it. He didn't know she had regained consciousness. He deliberately probed her, saying that miracles don't happen in this world. Then he told the prosecutor that he was Zhao Yunzou's legal guardian. He didn't allow the prosecutor to change Zhao Yunzou's treatment plan. What if she didn't recover? After he smugly left, Zhao Yunzou turned her head slightly, giving him a cold look as he walked away. She was ready to fight back. That day, she told the prosecutor about a crucial clue. She told her to investigate the wife of her husband's former driver. Maybe the driver had confided in his wife. The prosecutor went to see Mr. Kim's wife. She asked Mrs. Kim if, 17 years ago, when her husband was working as a driver for the wealthy family, he had acted strangely. Mrs. Kim said she hadn't noticed anything unusual. Her husband blamed himself for the accident, saying he had been careless and caused the boss to die. He became ill and didn't speak for days. Just then, Mrs. Kim suddenly remembered something. The landlady had come to help her pay the bills. They got into an argument. The prosecutor didn't feel comfortable asking further questions. She said she would come back another time and left. That evening, while cooking dinner, Mrs. Kim suddenly recalled a girl who had come to see Mr. Kim that day. As soon as the girl had seen him, she had called him Dad. Mrs. Kim had even argued with her husband about it. That same day, Mr. Kim had had the accident. He had told her that she had to return Zayi into her rightful place. Before he could finish his words, he passed away. Suddenly, Mrs. Kim realized something. She turned to look at Zayin, who had come to visit them on that day. She seemed to understand. Mrs. Kim rushed back to her room, remembering how Mr. Kim had been sitting there drinking like a lost soul 17 years ago. He had handed her a wad of cash, saying it was for her to be quiet. At the time, she didn't understand his meaning. She was only concerned with counting the money. She had no idea that it was hush money from the chairman. Now she understood. Mr. Kim had definitely kept something from her 17 years ago. She went to visit the chairman's wife at the hospital. They started talking about their children. Mrs. Kim said that her son, Young Kwang, was 27 now and was busy interviewing for jobs. The chairman's wife said that if her daughter, Jae-in, were still alive, she would be 26 years old this year. Mrs. Kim was stunned. She asked the chairman's wife to confirm her daughter's name. Jae-in, Yoon Jae-in, she replied. The Cinderella girl, unaware of her identity as a wealthy heiress, had just started her new job and already caused a big stir. She had accidentally pulled off a client's wig. "What are you doing?" he yelled. She quickly apologized, saying she hadn't meant to do it. She offered to buy him a new wig, but he pushed her away. The heir, who liked her, started to argue with the client. Just then, the chairman walked in. Everyone saw Jae Myung's stern expression and was terrified. They thought they were about to be fired. Jae Myung told the girl to apologize to the client. The bald man even threatened to cancel the deal if she didn't apologize. Jae-in, however, remained calm. She wrote something down and showed it to the important client. The client was shocked and couldn't help but look at Jae-in. She said, "A large ocean won't be stirred by a single pebble. A big tree won't be swayed by a gentle breeze. I admit I was wrong. If a small employee like me causes the cancellation of the deal, I don't think that's the way a big company should behave." The bald man accused Jae-in of not apologizing sincerely and refused to withdraw his decision to end the deal. Just as he was about to tell his boss to leave, the boss stopped him. Everyone was surprised and confused. The boss handed Jae-in's paper to Jae Myung. It contained 8 Chinese characters. The benevolent do not argue. The argumentative are not benevolent. This is enough. This is enough. She likes Lao Tzu. She likes Lao Tzu. I like the Tao Te Ching. She likes a book called the Tao Te Ching. What about you? My father liked Lao Tzu very much. I do too. I hope to join your company. I would like to cooperate with you on future transactions. J.In., with her extensive knowledge, had used her knowledge of Chinese culture to defuse the situation. Jae Myung, seeing her erudition, found her quite interesting, but he couldn't believe that this was the girl he had been searching for all this time. Curiously, he asked her name. Jae-in, she replied. Jae Myung's eyes widened in disbelief. He suspected she was the daughter of his brother, whom he had murdered. So, he asked who her father was. Kim In-bae. Jae Myung finally understood everything. He remembered what Kim In-bae had said to him before the accident. The child is still alive. You must return her to her rightful place. The chairman had been trying to take over Kim In-bae's company for 17 years. He had threatened Kim In-bae to remove the amnesiac girl's name from the family register and take her to an orphanage. Now that girl was working for him. He decided to take action against Jae-in again. But the method he was going to use would surely surprise you. The man couldn't understand why Jae Myung was hitting him. It turned out that Jae Myung knew Jae-in's identity. He asked his nephew, "What is your purpose in keeping Jae-in by your son's side?" At that moment, In-woo ran over and told his father it wasn't In-chul's fault. He said he hadn't allowed him to tell him. He was afraid that if his father found out about Jae-in's true identity, she would be in danger. He liked Jae-in, but she didn't know her identity as a wealthy heiress. Nor did she know who her father was. Jae Myung roared, cursing his son for being insane. "If you continue to protect her, you and I, and this entire company, will be destroyed by this girl." He told his nephew to immediately fire Jae-in, who had only just started working, and collect all the documents she had received. Meanwhile, using the paper his father had left behind, Young Kwang had found Jae-in's real father. It turned out Jae-in wasn't his half-sister. After In-woo learned about Jae-in's identity, he didn't tell her. Instead, he planned to take her far away to escape his father's wrath. But Jae-in didn't want to leave with him. In-woo was furious. "You're only allowed to love me," he said, and then he smashed her phone. At that very moment, Young Kwang also arrived at the company. He didn't tell Jae-in what he had discovered either. He just patted her head to comfort her, telling her to wait there for him. He said he was going to see Heo Young-do and would be back soon. Young Kwang told Heo Young-do that he had deciphered the secret on the paper. The answer was the serial number of Jae-in's father's memorial tablet. Young Kwang also understood why his father had left him that note before his accident. Before he passed away, he had told Young Kwang to return Jae-in to her rightful place. Now, Young Kwang finally understood his father's words. His father wanted him to return her to her position as the heiress of the conglomerate. He told Heo Young-do that he was going to take back everything that belonged to Jae-in from Jae Myung. Heo Young-do said, "Approved." On the other side, Jae Myung looked at Jae-in's documents, a cruel expression on his face. It seemed he had devised a plan to deal with her. He sent his subordinates to Young Kwang's house. Young Kwang's family was having dinner when they saw the chairman arrive. They were all shocked. Young Kwang went up to him and asked why he was at their house. Jae Myung responded, "All of you are trash." Everyone was stunned. They thought, when did we offend him? Jae Myung ordered his subordinates to drag Young Kwang out. Then he went in front of Jae-in and began to act like he was embracing her. He put on an Oscar-worthy performance, saying over and over, "I'm so sorry." He told Jae-in, "I've been looking for you for 17 years. I couldn't believe you were so close to me and I still couldn't find you." It seemed the chairman was trying to escape responsibility. He said that it was because he had bribed Kim In-bae to get rid of Jae-in, that he had carelessly abandoned her when she was a baby. Then he said that Jae-in's father was his business partner. Tragically, one rainy day, the driver drove into the sea, causing her father's death. And the driver was Young Kwang's father. The day your father had the accident, you and your mother were on your way to find him when the accident happened, Jae Myung said. But Jae-in believed him. She asked him if her mother was still alive and where she was. Jae Myung started his performance again. He said that after the accident, her mother had become a vegetable. Sadly, she passed away not too long ago. If I had found you sooner, you could have met your real mother. All of this is because of Young Kwang's deceased father. He used finding you as an excuse to extort money from me. He even took you to his home. He did such terrible things. He ruined your life. So you must leave this house. Come home with me now. Jae-in wasn't entirely convinced by his words. She went to find Mrs. Kim to confirm. She hoped Mrs. Kim would tell her that all of this wasn't true. But Mrs. Kim, knowing Jae-in's true identity, knelt before her. She bowed her head and apologized, saying that Mr. Kim was the one who had abandoned her. She didn't know why he had done it. She couldn't ask the deceased, so she could only apologize to Jae-in on her husband's behalf. Jae-in couldn't believe it was all true. She collapsed to the ground and fainted. When she woke up again, she was in Jae Myung's house. She went to her biological father's memorial tablet, but all of her actions were monitored by Jae Myung's people. Jae-in didn't know that her tragic fate had only just begun. The country girl had just moved into the wealthy household. The matriarch of the family criticized her clothes as being too rustic, unaware that she was the true owner of this house. She forced Jae-in to take off her cheap clothes. She said it was the only way to erase the poverty she had lived in for 17 years. Now she had to wear expensive clothes. But Jae-in knew that the matriarch was insulting her. She left heartbroken. She went to find Young Kwang and confided in him. She didn't have the confidence to face the upcoming life at the wealthy family. She hoped they could forget the past grievances and be together openly. If you could give up your surname, would you still love me? Jae-in didn't reject Young Kwang. This warm scene was witnessed by Mrs. Kim. Then, Young Kwang looked at Jae-in with love in his eyes. He wanted to take her to a place where no one knew them and live a happy life. But as they were leaving, Jae-myung sent people to bring Jae-in back and beat Young Kwang up. Seeing her son gasping for breath, Mrs. Kim blamed Jae-in. Didn't you go back to the wealthy family? Why did you come back here and make things so messy? She pleaded with Jae-in to go back and live a good life with her mother. Jae-in was stunned. Jae-myung had told her that her mother had passed away recently. She wanted to ask Mrs. Kim how she knew her mother, but In-chul stopped her. In-woo ran over and told Jae-in, "If you don't want something to happen to Young Kwang's family, go back to me." Jae-in looked at Mrs. Kim doubtfully. Mrs. Kim nodded, as if she had something to tell her later. As In-woo took Jae-in away, Young Kwang, who was unconscious, suddenly woke up. He begged Jae-in not to leave. She wanted to stay with him, but thinking about her mother still being alive, she couldn't let Young Kwang's family suffer because of her. She also had many secrets to unravel, so she left with In-woo. On the way back, Jae-in asked In-woo, "Is my mother really dead? Why did your father tell me that my mother had been paralyzed for a long time and had just passed away? Is Mrs. Kim lying?" In-woo didn't answer. It seemed he had understood Jae-myung's motives for bringing her back. When they arrived at the wealthy household, Jae-myung threatened Jae-in. "If I find out that you're meeting with Young Kwang's family again, I'll send them all to a place where no one will ever find them." Jae-in was terrified. She shook her head repeatedly and begged him not to do that. She promised to be good and would not run away again. Hearing this, Jae-myung changed his attitude. He told Jae-in to treat him like her real father. He could do anything for her. Jae-in didn't understand his true intentions, but In-woo standing beside her saw through his father. Later, In-woo went to his father's study and questioned him. "My mother is still alive. Why did you tell her that she's dead?" Jae-myung responded, "Until I get her signature on the transfer documents for her share of the company, I can't let her meet her mother." Finally, In-woo understood why his father had brought Jae-in home. He was using her. Jae-myung said, "Why else would I bring a troublesome girl like this home? This isn't just about business. It's about me actually becoming the owner of the company." He continued, "I know you like Jae-in, but if you keep protecting her, you will ruin my career." But this time, In-woo was no longer afraid of his father. He angrily said, "The company was stolen from Jae-in's father, and you took away 17 years of her life. You should return that to her. And now you want to exploit her in a cowardly way. You're shameless." As you might expect, In-woo was beaten up by his father. He suffered a relapse of his old illness and lay on the floor convulsing. Despite this, Jae-myung wasn't going to let his son off the hook, as he was about to attack him again. Thankfully, Jae-in heard the commotion and rushed over to intervene. She brought a first aid kit and treated In-woo's wounds. The scene brought back memories of 17 years ago for In-woo. He had developed feelings for her then and wanted to help her find her mother. In-woo secretly called his doctor and asked about the room where Jae-in's mother was staying. In-chul, who had been in a vegetative state for 17 years, had been secretly practicing physical therapy. She wanted to avenge her deceased husband. When In-chul pretended to be unconscious, the chairman, who had killed her husband, learned that she had regained consciousness and immediately went to her room. Facing her questioner, she continued to pretend to be unconscious. But she didn't know that Jae-myung had known she was awake for a long time. He left on purpose, and she slowly opened her eyes, turning her head to see him staring at her with a cruel look. In-chul was so frightened that her heart nearly stopped. If she didn't get help soon, she would be in grave danger. Meanwhile, Jae-in suddenly received a message informing her that her mother was at a certain hospital and in a specific room. She was shocked because Jae-myung had just told her that her mother was dead. She quickly rushed to the hospital to find her mother. But when she opened the door, her mother wasn't there. She asked the nurse who was cleaning up In-chul's bed where she was. The nurse nervously replied that there was no patient named In-chul there. Jae-in rushed to the reception desk to ask, and showed the nurse her phone. But the receptionist also told her that there was no such patient there. It was probably just a spam message. Jae-in didn't know that Jae-myung had bribed the nurses and the hospital director to move her mother to another location. Disappointed, Jae-in didn't know if her mother was still alive. At that moment, Young Kwang's mother appeared before her. She told Jae-in that her mother was still alive. She said that she had just peeled apples for Jae-in's mother in the hospital room a few days ago. However, they didn't know that their conversation was overheard by Jae-myung's subordinates, who were monitoring Jae-in. He immediately called Jae-myung and told him, "This damn fool hasn't seen the coffin, so she doesn't know what crying is." Jae-in returns home, and Jae-myung knows he can't keep her in the dark much longer. He quickly urges Jae-in to sign the share transfer agreement, wanting to seize the shares her father left her and become the true owner of the company. But Jae-in declares she won't sign unless he reveals her mother's whereabouts. Cornered, Jae-myung resorts to theatrics. He berates Jae-in for still believing the person who deceived her for 17 years, questioning the validity of his own words. Jae-in is caught in a web of doubt, unsure who to trust. Just as she hesitates, In-woo bursts in. He pleads with her not to sign and tells his father to stop. Jae-myung erupts in anger ready to strike his son. But this time, Inwoo stands his ground. He's always endured his father's beatings, but this time, he fights back. He gently lowers his father's hand, and in that moment, Jae-moong realizes he's grown old and is no longer a match for his son. After taking Jae-in away, Inwoo remarks that his father is weak now, and he's no longer afraid of him. Meanwhile, In-chul awakens to find herself bound in a hospital bed. As she grapples with despair, a mysterious figure appears in her room. This individual, promising to change her fate, claims to be there to help her. He offers to move her to a better room and assures her they're in this together. He intends to help her bring Jae-moong down. On the other side of town, Jae-moong corners In-chul and threatens to force her daughter to sign the share transfer agreement. Just as she's about to give in, In-woo arrives and intervenes. Jae-moong stares at the unsigned agreement, a sinister glint in his eyes. He clearly has a new plan to manipulate Jae-in. The next day, the landlord informs Mrs. Kim that Jae-in has offered a hefty sum for the noodle shop, forcing them to vacate immediately. Young Kwang, convinced that Jae-in wouldn't do such a thing, and knowing she doesn't have the funds, suspects Jae-moong's involvement. He confronts Jae-moong, only to be met with a mocking reply. Jae-moong tells him this is just the beginning of his suffering, making clear his intentions to torment him further. His cunning plan is twofold: to sow discord between Jae-in and Young Kwang, while simultaneously exploiting Jae-in's good nature. Young Kwang's sister accuses Jae-in of being ungrateful, reminding her of how they treated her kindly before she joined the wealthy family. To secure the noodle shop lease, Jae-in is forced to sign the share transfer agreement. She secretly places it in the shop before leaving. Mrs. Kim, finding the agreement, is touched by Jae-in's kindness. Desperate to find her mother, Jae-in frantically searches the hospital, even getting thrown out. A kind nurse, seeing her desperation, reveals that her mother regained consciousness and has been looking for her. She's in room 806. Jae-in rushes to the room, only to find In-chul showing her mother a picture of Jae-in, claiming she thinks her mother is dead and is now blindly trusting Jae-moong. He implies she signed the agreement out of naivete. Time is of the essence. Jae-moong is plotting to take control of the company by manipulating the board of directors and seizing both his son's and Jae-in's shares. He wants to swallow the entire company whole, and to ensure his success, he'll go to any length to keep the mother and daughter apart. This could put Jae-in in danger too. In-chul, horrified, wants to personally thwart his scheme. In-chul quickly sends her away under the protection of his men. Meanwhile, Jae-in is desperately trying to find out which room her mother is in. Fate loves to play cruel tricks. Jae-in and her mother narrowly miss each other. When Jae-in opens a room door, she sees In-chul leaving, the room empty. She begs him to help her find her mother. In-chul takes her to Jae-moong's office, where she witnesses a tense confrontation between In-chul and Jae-moong. After 17 years, mother and daughter are finally reunited. But the emotional shock causes In-chul to faint. She's rushed to the hospital, but she doesn't regain consciousness. This is Jae-in's first encounter with her mother in 17 years. She wants to tell her so much. With her mother unconscious, Jae-in struggles to find words to express her feelings. She sits alone in the waiting area, anxious as her mother undergoes surgery. The prosecutor arrives to visit In-chul. Upon learning Jae-in's identity, she offers comfort, saying her mother is a fighter. Despite being in a coma for 17 years, she woke up wanting to see Jae-in. She even began physical therapy. This time, she'll pull through. However, the prosecutor has to leave due to an important trial. Before leaving, she gives Jae-in her number, urging her to call if she needs anything. Back at the hospital, the doctor informs Jae-in that her mother's condition is not promising. Her chances of regaining consciousness are slim. Her previous awakening was a miracle. Jae-in is heartbroken. Just as they are reunited, her mother's life hangs in the balance. Thinking back to how Jae-moong lied to her about her mother's death and his cruel treatment of her, Jae-in is consumed by questions about those lost 17 years. What truly happened to her parents? Determined to get answers, Jae-in seeks out the prosecutor. She wants to know the whole story. Why did her father die? Why did her mother become a vegetable? Why was she abandoned? The prosecutor reveals all the shocking details. Armed with the truth, Jae-in is ready to fight back. She will reclaim what was stolen from her by Jae-moong. She confronts him directly, accusing him of orchestrating her father's fatal accident to gain control of the company. She accuses him of lying about her mother's death. Faced with her direct accusations, Jae-moong throws off all pretense, revealing his true colors. He declares that her mother, in a vegetative state, is essentially dead, a living corpse. Jae-in can't stand to hear another word from Jae-moong. She slaps him hard, furious. "Shut up. I'll never forgive you. You'll suffer the same pain I have." Infuriated, Jae-moong grabs Jae-in by the collar and snarls, "You're just a small pebble. How can you possibly overthrow me?" Undeterred, Jae-in counters, "People don't stumble because of mountains, but because of small pebbles. I'll be the one that trips you up." Jae-moong, regaining his composure, laughs, "I look forward to your revenge, but if you fail to bring me down, it will be your undoing." Jae-in leaves the mansion, unsure how a lone wolf like her can possibly make good on her promise. An unkempt, scruffy old man enters a massive company building. No one expects this dusty figure to be a tycoon among tycoons. Employees scatter at the sight of him, unaware he will change the fate of this company. He plops a heavy bag, filled with a tent, on the receptionist's counter, demanding Judah Sung come down immediately. The receptionist, intimidated, quickly calls him. Judah Sung in his office jumps to his feet upon receiving the call. He's terrified. Why did the receptionist tell the old man he'd be right down? Couldn't she have just said he wasn't in? He's panicking when he hears the old man wants to come upstairs. His coworkers, seeing his pathetic state, think he's gone mad. The old man is back. Curious, Young Kwang asks the girl about this influential figure who scares Judah Sung so much. She explains that this happens every year. The old man comes to find Judah Sung to fix the tent he sold him. Another employee adds that the tent was bought 20 years ago and has since broken. Judah Sung agreed to fix it and sold it to the old man at a 39% discount. Desperate to delegate, Judah Sung tries to foist the responsibility off on his colleagues, but they all find excuses to decline. No one wants to touch that hot potato. He then looks toward Young Kwang, who has recently joined the company. Young Kwang, against his will, goes to meet the old man. Little does he know that this seemingly insignificant encounter will be the turning point in his life. Using his persuasive skills, Young Kwang convinces the old man to let him fix the tent. The old man hands Young Kwang the dusty bag, saying he'll return later. Young Kwang stares at the dilapidated tent, unaware that his troubles are just beginning. Young Kwang brings the tent to Judah Sung, thinking a simple part replacement will do the trick. But Judah Sung tells him it's a 20-year-old model. The parts are obsolete and no longer available anywhere in the world. He tells Young Kwang he's on his own, and then scurries away. Young Kwang is stuck. He'd already agreed to fix the tent for the old man within 24 hours at another location. Meanwhile, Jae Moong is seeking funding from the old man to take over the company. He needs this money to truly seize control of Jae-in's father's company. The old man's butler tells Jae Moong that the old man has gone out and is not home. Meanwhile, Jae-in is determined to reclaim her father's company from Jae Moong. But her lawyer tells her that even if she sells all her shares, she'll still be short 30 billion won. She needs someone to loan her the money to fight Jae Moong. The only person who could possibly come up with that amount on the spot is the legendary Mr. Huang, but he's been living in seclusion for years. Finding him would be a long shot. Young Kwang takes the old man's tent to be repaired. He tries to convince the old man to swap it for a brand new one, but unbeknownst to him, the old man is Mr. Huang himself. The old man refuses to exchange it, explaining that it's precious to him. It's the last gift from his deceased son. Young Kwang doesn't want the old man to be disappointed, so he brings the tent back to the company. He tells Judah Sung that he needs to fix the tent no matter what. Fate smiles upon him. He finds the parts to repair the tent in the company warehouse. That night, Young Kwang brings the repaired tent to the old man, fulfilling his long-held wish. The old man beams at Young Kwang with satisfaction. That same day, Young Kwang learns from Heo Dong-do that Jae Moong has been elected chairman again. The only way to stop him is with money. To buy back all the shares in the company, Jae-in needs Mr. Huang, the only person with that kind of money. If she can convince him, she can beat Jae Moong. Heo Dong-do introduces Young Kwang to Mr. Huang, hoping to get him to loan Jae-in the money. Mr. Hang is willing to lend the money, but Young Kwang is broke and has no collateral. He sees the tent parts on a shelf and realizes that Mr. Huang is the old man he helped. Mr. Hang slowly turns around and smiles. This is the guy he's been looking for. Desperately poor, Young Kwang puts his life on the line to borrow 30 billion won from Mr. Huang, all to help the woman he loves reclaim her father's company from Jae Moong. When Young Kwang excitedly shows Jae-in the contract, he sees her kissing In-woo. It turns out In-woo has made a deal with Jae-in. He'll destroy his own father, but only if she agrees to be with him. He's putting on a show for Jae Moong. Jae-in doesn't back down, but as she turns to leave, she sees Young Kwang. Although Young Kwang is heartbroken, he hands her the contract he risked his life for. His love for her driving him. As he holds Jae-in's hand, their shared moments flash before his eyes. They've been through so much together, and he's always been her silent supporter. Even though they can't be together, he still gave her the contract he fought for. He buries his love for her deep inside, knowing he can't express it. He lets go of her hand and walks away, determined to reclaim her father's company from Jae Moong. Jae-in watches him leave, her heart filled with her own unspoken love for him. She walks to the hospital, thinking about her mother, still unconscious in the bed. She doubts her decisions. What choices should she make? She sits on a bench, tears streaming down her face. Heo Dong-do appears, tells her about Young Kwang's sacrifice, and hands her a note. He instructs her to go to the address on the note and meet Mr. Huang at 7 a.m. That's how she'll get what she wants. Mr. Huang is a tycoon amongst tycoons. Even Jae Moong wants to find him to discuss company financing. If Jae-in doesn't find Mr. Huang by 7 a.m., her father's company will be lost to Jae Moong. As Heo Dong-do leaves, Young Kwang emerges from hiding. He asked Heo Dong-do to tell Jae-in. He's relieved to see Heo Dong-do successfully persuading Jae-in. He gives Heo Dong-do a grateful nod. He steals a glance at Jae-in. Don't be late. Be there on time, he whispers. The next morning, Jae-in goes to the address on the note to meet Mr. Huang. Jae-moon arrives at the same place. He's stunned when he sees her. Why is she here? Jae-moon wonders silently as Mr. Huang motions for Jae-in to sit down. Then, Mr. Huang turns to Jae-moon. You've come to borrow money too? Jae-moon fumes. Is my interest offer not high enough? Jae-in, prepared, immediately pulls out the documents she'd prepared. She hopes Mr. Huang will loan her the money to save her father's company. But Mr. Huang tells her she doesn't need collateral. He already has it. Young Kwang used his life as collateral for the loan. Therefore, he can't offer the loan to Jae-moon. Jae-moon explodes in fury, his eyes blazing. Both men, furious, stand up and leave. Jae-in, furious, seeks out Young Kwang. She kicks him hard in the leg, scolding him for risking his life. Why are you so reckless? Why would you use your life as collateral? You think so little of your life? Young Kwang explains, I wasn't reckless. I placed my life in your hands. I'm nothing but a poor guy. The only thing I can give you is my life. You have to beat Jae-moon. I'll be your sword. This is all I hope for, to see your smile again, to see you happy. That's all I want. Jae-in, touched, is lost in thought. She remembers the necklace the mountain god gifted her. Her first wish was to reunite with her family. Her second was to become a capable nurse. Her third was to find someone good for her. The first wish came true. She found her mother, and she's realized that Young Kwang is the one she loves. Jae-in goes to Mr. Huang and says, I can't use Young Kwang's life to borrow this money. Mr. Huang is confused. Without this money, the company will fall into Jae-moon's hands. Jae-in replies, if I use Young Kwang as collateral, I might not be able to smile like I did before. She asks Mr. Huang to return Young Kwang's life because she has found a way to deal with Jae-moon. Jae-in returns to the company and declares that she's giving all 50% of her shares to the company's employees. She knows that's the only way to save her father's company. Jae-moon, upon hearing the news, is consumed with anger. He vents his frustration on his subordinates and lashes out at In-chul, calling him useless. If he doesn't handle this right, Jae-moon will kill him. But In-chul delivers all the evidence he's gathered against his father. He claims his father will be investigated by the police and won't be able to hold on to the chairmanship. Young Kwang is skeptical. He can't believe that In-chul, always loyal to his father, has switched sides. If he had, it would be dangerous for him too. But In-chul says he believes Jae-in wouldn't hurt anyone for him. He doesn't want to be his father's puppet anymore. Soon after, Jae-moon is arrested by the police. During questioning, he suddenly faints. The doctor tells In-woo that Jae-moon has been battling late-stage cancer for a long time. It's a miracle he's lasted this long. Everyone feels that justice has finally been served. After reclaiming her company, Jae-in goes to see Jae-moon. He thinks she's come to mock him, but she tells him he needs to cooperate with doctors and fight for his life. Don't just sit there angry. You need treatment. She grabs the blood pressure monitor from a nurse and checks his vitals. When he asks what she's doing, she says, I forgive you. Not for you, but for myself. If I don't do this, I'll regret it. Get treatment. But soon after, Jae-moon passes away. Before he dies, he tells his son he's never regretted anything in his life. The only regret he has is that if Jae-in's father had been the one pulled from the sea that day, his own ending might have been different. Soon after, Jae-in's mother awakens from her coma. Mother and daughter embrace, sobbing with relief, knowing nothing can keep them apart anymore. 9 months later, Jae-in returns to her old job, a skilled nurse. Young Kwang, true to his promise to Jae-in, becomes a famous basketball player. He visits the hospital to see her and asks again about their promise. If I become a basketball star, will you marry me? At that moment, Jae-in realizes her third wish has come true. She's found her soulmate. Jae-in and Young Kwang live happily ever after. The end. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed the movie. Wishing you a life of happiness and wealth. We'll see you at the next movie. Bye.